As Jake scrambled to fix his spicy mistake, one thing was clear: if he didn't figure it out soon, the Veiltrix wouldn't be the only ones feeling the heat. Jake leaned against the railing of his small Earth Standard balcony, sipping a mug of steaming coffee. It was his first morning in the intergalactic convergence colony, where species from across the stars lived together in awkward harmony, or so the brochure had promised. The truth, Jake was quickly discovering, was that humans were regarded as little more than novelty pets by their alien neighbors. A group of towering Veiltrix strolled by, their bioluminescent markings flickering in synchronized patterns that Jake suspected were insults. He gave them a half-hearted wave. "Oh, look," one of them sneered, their voice smooth yet dripping with derision. "The human. How quaint. Tell me, did you build that primitive structure with your bare hands?" Jake plastered on a grin. "Nope, just slapped it together between mating rituals. You'd be amazed what these primitive hands can do." The group tittered in what Jake assumed was their equivalent of laughter, though it sounded suspiciously like choking. One of them, a striking figure with silver-blue skin and an air of superiority, stepped forward. "That explains the smell," she said, her luminous eyes narrowing. "I am Zarina, the colony's diplomatic liaison. And you must be, what do they call it? A species relations specialist?" "That's me," Jake replied, extending a hand. Zarina regarded it like he'd offered her a dead fish. Jake let his hand drop awkwardly. "Just here to make friends and build bridges. You know, interstellar relations." Zarina said, her tone sharp. "Well, as a Veiltrix, I find such efforts charmingly futile. But do enjoy your stay." As she turned to leave, another Veiltrix muttered just loud enough for Jake to hear, "Primitive breeders. Probably spreads love the way he spreads germs." Jake's smile froze. He took a long sip of his coffee and muttered to himself, "Great start." Later that day, a sleek, insectoid drone delivered an invitation to Jake's quarters. It was a holographic scroll that unfurled with an unnecessary amount of fanfare, announcing a diplomatic dinner hosted by the Veiltrix. Jake stared at it for a full minute before deciding it was either a trap or the universe's cruelest joke. Still, he had a job to do. By the time evening rolled around, he was standing nervously at the entrance of the Veiltrix Community Center, clutching a covered dish. His contribution to the meal, his grandmother's infamous fertility smoothie, a recipe passed down through generations and known for its invigorating effects. Inside, the Veiltrix were already seated around a shimmering crystalline table, their elegant forms glowing faintly under the soft, pulsating lights. Jake felt like a scruffy mutt crashing a gala for pedigree cats. "Ah, the human arrives," Zarina announced, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "And he's brought something." Jake set the dish down with exaggerated care. "Family recipe. It's all about spreading love, figuratively speaking, of course." A ripple of amused disdain passed through the room. One of the Veiltrix leaned forward, their translucent skin catching the light. "Primitive cuisine? How quaint." "It's got a bit of a kick," Jake said, lifting the lid to reveal a vibrant, frothy liquid. He poured a small sample into a crystalline goblet and slid it toward Zarina. "Careful, though. It's been known to leave a lasting impression." Zarina raised an eyebrow but took the goblet with a regal flourish. The others followed suit, albeit reluctantly. Jake watched as they took cautious sips, their expressions shifting from disdain to something uncomfortably close to intrigue. "It's unusual," Zarina admitted, her tone hesitant. "Yeah, that's the spice," Jake said, grinning. "Humans love a little heat. Keeps things interesting." Zarina's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts curiosity and condescension. "Perhaps there's more to you humans than meets the eye. Though I doubt it's much." Jake laughed, though it came out a little forced. "Well, if nothing else, we know how to make an impression." The dinner proceeded with strained civility. The Veiltrix continued to sip the smoothie, their bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. Zarina, in particular, seemed unusually animated, her sharp remarks softening into something almost flirtatious. Jake, oblivious to the subtle shifts, leaned back in his chair, feeling for the first time that he might actually survive his time in the colony. He raised his glass in a toast. Here's to interstellar relations, messy, complicated, and always full of surprises. Serena's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. Indeed, she murmured, her tone oddly thoughtful. As the evening drew to a close, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Whether it was his awkward charm or the magic of his grandmother's smoothie, he didn't know. But for the first time since arriving, he felt like he might have a shot at fitting in. Or so he thought. The night after the dinner, Jake felt an unusual sense of accomplishment. He had survived the sharp-tongued Veiltrix and even managed to make them drink his grandmother's smoothie. Maybe that was his introduce a little humanity to their rigid, sterile routines. He didn't think much about Serena's lingering gaze or the way her luminous patterns had flickered erratically as she left. The next morning, Jake was jolted awake by the sound of his door chime. Groggy, he stumbled to the door to find Serena standing there, her usually imperious demeanor slightly disheveled. She looked off. "You human," she began, her tone sharper than usual but tinged with something else. "Was it urgency? I require more of that concoction you served last night." Jake blinked. "The smoothie?" "Yes," Serena snapped. "I find myself craving it. Intensely." Jake raised an eyebrow. Sure. I mean, it's just some earth fruits and spices. Didn't think it'd be your thing." "It is irrelevant what you thought," she retorted, stepping into his quarters without invitation. "Make it. Now." As Jake hurried to assemble the ingredients, Serena paced the small space like a caged animal. Her usually smooth, fluid movements were jerky, and she kept rubbing her temples as though trying to clear her head. "Rough morning?" Jake ventured, attempting a light-hearted tone. Serena shot him a glare. "Do not mock me, human. I feel peculiar. It is difficult to explain." Jake handed her a fresh glass of the smoothie, which she snatched and downed in one gulp. For a moment, she closed her eyes, and her glowing patterns pulsed in a slow, rhythmic wave. When she opened them, her gaze locked onto Jake's, and he felt an unfamiliar intensity in her expression. "This is not normal," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "What have you done to us?" "Whoa, hold on," Jake said, holding up his hands. "It's just a smoothie. Fruits, spices, maybe a little ginger for zing. Nothing dangerous." Serena's bioluminescence flared briefly, and she stepped closer to him, her towering figure casting a faint glow. "Your primitive concoction has altered us. Several of my kind have reported similar symptoms since the dinner. Increased temperature, heightened senses, and other effects." Jake frowned. "Other effects?" Serena hesitated, her gaze dropping for the first time. "It is not something we discuss openly. But suffice it to say, our bodies are reacting in ways they should not. Naturally or otherwise." Jake's brain scrambled to make sense of her words. "Wait, are you saying the smoothie did something? Like, biologically?" "That is precisely what I am saying," Serena replied, her voice laced with frustration. "And now you will explain how your primitive food could trigger such a response in a species as advanced as the Veiltrix." Jake felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. Okay. Let's not panic. Maybe it's just an allergy or something. I'll call the med lab." "No." Serena interrupted, her voice firm. "This is not to be made public. It would be humiliating." Jake tilted his head. "Humiliating? Why?" Serena hesitated again, clearly struggling to articulate her thoughts. Finally, she said, "The Veiltrix do not reproduce naturally. Our offspring are cultivated in controlled environments, free of biological interference. It has been this way for millennia. For us to conceive without intention is unthinkable." Jake's jaw dropped. "Conceive? As in, you're pregnant?" Serena's expression darkened. "Not just me. Several of us. Jake staggered back, his mind reeling. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're saying my smoothie made you guys pregnant? That doesn't even make sense. I didn't. I mean, there wasn't any, we didn't. Serena's glowing patterns flickered erratically again, and she pinched the bridge of her nose. Do not be absurd, human. There was no direct interaction. But something in your concoction has activated a dormant genetic sequence in our physiology, triggering a state of fertility. Jake slumped into a chair, running a hand through his hair. This can't be happening. I just wanted to share a little human culture, not start an intergalactic baby boom. Serena's lips pressed into a thin line. Your intentions are irrelevant. What matters now is containing this situation before it escalates further. Okay, Jake said, holding up his hands. Let's think this through. Maybe it's reversible. Or maybe it's just a temporary reaction. Serena crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. You will assist in resolving this, human. If word spreads, it could cause a diplomatic crisis. The Veiltrix pride themselves on their superior biology. To be undone by spices is intolerable. Jake couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure spices that spark intergalactic pregnancies wasn't in my job description. Serena's glowing patterns flared again, and she took a step closer to him. Do not test me, human. You are the cause of this, and you will find the solution. If you fail. Jake gulped. Got it. No pressure. As Serena turned to leave, she paused in the doorway. And one more thing. You will make no more of that, smoothie. For anyone. Is that understood? Jake nodded, still too stunned to form a coherent response. Good, Serena said. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, a strange mix of anger and something else he couldn't quite place. Then she was gone, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and a growing sense of dread. He stared at the empty glass on the counter, his mind racing. Well, Grandma, he muttered to himself, I don't think this is what you meant by spreading love. Jake spent the next few hours in a frantic haze, poring over everything he knew, or didn't know, about alien biology. His tablet was loaded with research on the Veiltrix, though most of it was vague, classified, or written in a language that seemed to defy the laws of grammar. What he could gather was that their reproductive systems were complex, artificial, and so far removed from anything natural that they made human IVF look like a backyard science project. But no matter how hard he tried, Jake couldn't wrap his head around how a simple smoothie could turn their biology upside down. He'd even double-checked his recipe: mango, papaya, cayenne, ginger, a little honey. Nothing alien. Nothing groundbreaking. Unless... His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, frantic chime at his door. Bracing himself for another confrontation, he opened it to find a Veiltrix he didn't recognize. This one was shorter, though still a head taller than him, with an anxious expression and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed erratically. Human, they said, their voice breathy and urgent. You must help me. Jake blinked. Hi. Can I help you? The Veiltrix fidgeted, their glowing patterns flickering like a faulty neon sign. The symptoms. They've begun. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I'm trying to figure this out, okay? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but I need more time. There is no time, the Veiltrix exclaimed, stepping closer. My partner, our leaders, none of them can know. It would bring disgrace to my lineage. Jake threw up his hands. I don't even know where to start. You guys are like walking glow sticks with supercomputer DNA. I'm just a human with a blender and a questionable sense of humor. The Veiltrix froze, their gaze narrowing. You jest at a time like this? Is this how humans cope with catastrophe? Pretty much, Jake replied. Now, unless you've got some secret Veiltrix user manual hidden somewhere, I need you to back off and let me think. The alien hesitated, then reluctantly stepped back. Very well. But know this, human, if you do not find a solution, the blame will fall squarely on you. As they left, Jake slumped into his chair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. It wasn't just Serena or this frantic newcomer. The entire Veiltrix community was at risk of being thrown into chaos, all because of a drink he'd made on a whim. Desperate for answers, Jake decided to consult the only other human in the colony, Dr. Eliza Kapoor, a xenobiologist known for her no-nonsense attitude and cutting wit. He found her in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays and samples of alien flora. "Jake," she said, not looking up from her work. "What brings you to my humble den of science?" "I need help," Jake said bluntly. "Big, weird, alien pregnancy help." That got her attention. She turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Alien pregnancy? That's specific." Jake explained the situation as best he could, watching as Dr. Kapoor's expression shifted from amusement to confusion to something bordering on concern. "So let me get this straight," she said when he finished. "You fed the Veiltrix a fertility smoothie, something designed to enhance human reproduction, and now they're spontaneously reproducing?" Jake nodded. "Pretty much." Dr. Kapoor sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Jake, you absolute moron. Do you have any idea how different their biology is from ours? What did you think would happen?" "I thought they'd think it was spicy and weird and maybe stop making fun of me for 5 minutes," Jake admitted. "Well, congratulations," she said dryly. "You've managed to unite an entire species against you. Can you help me or not?" Jake asked, his tone desperate. Dr. Kapoor sighed again but gestured for him to follow her to a workstation. She pulled up a detailed analysis of Veiltrix genetics, pointing to a series of complex diagrams that meant nothing to Jake. "The Veiltrix have dormant genes from their evolutionary past," she explained. "Genes they haven't used in millennia because their society relies entirely on artificial reproduction. If your smoothie triggered those genes..." Jake groaned. "So it's my fault." "Great. Can we fix it?" "Maybe," Dr. Kapoor said, typing furiously. "If we can isolate the compound in your smoothie that caused the reaction, we might be able to reverse it, or at least suppress the symptoms." "Great," Jake said, a spark of hope igniting. "What do you need from me?" "Another batch of that smoothie," she replied. "And maybe a miracle." Jake spent the next few hours blending ingredients and watching as Dr. Kapoor ran test after test, her frustration growing with each failed attempt. "This is insane," she muttered, throwing up her hands. "The compound responsible for this isn't even in your ingredients. It must have been a chemical reaction caused by the Veiltrix biology interacting with Earth enzymes." Jake frowned. "So, it's like a perfect storm? A 1 in a million chance?" "More like 1 in a billion," she said, staring at the results in disbelief. "Congratulations, Jake. You've accidentally created the galaxy's weirdest fertility drug." "That's not helping," Jake muttered. Dr. Kapoor sighed. "Look, I'll keep working on this, but you need to buy us some time. Keep the Veiltrix off my back while I figure out how to undo this mess." "Right," Jake said, already dreading his next encounter with Serena. "No pressure." Jake stood in front of Serena once again, her imposing figure radiating a mixture of impatience and barely concealed anxiety. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed erratically, betraying the tension she was trying so hard to mask. Jake had been summoned, not invited, to her quarters, a sleek, minimalist space that felt more like a high-tech museum than a home. "I trust you have made progress, human," Serena began, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Progress is a strong word. Dr. Kapoor is working on it, but it's not exactly a straightforward fix. Turns out your biology and human spices don't mix well." Serena narrowed her eyes. "I was not seeking excuses. I was seeking results." "Yeah, well," Jake said, crossing his arms, "unraveling the mystery of intergalactic accidental pregnancies isn't exactly in the human playbook." Serena's patterns flared in irritation, but she didn't interrupt. Instead, she stepped closer, towering over him. You may find this amusing, but for my people, this is a matter of dignity, of survival. We cannot allow this contamination to spread further. Contamination? Jake echoed, bristling. Hey, it's not like I did this on purpose. And for the record, maybe your people wouldn't be in this mess if you didn't treat biology like a dirty word. Serena's gaze sharpened. Watch your tongue, human. You do not understand the implications of what you've done. Then enlighten me, Jake shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like your species is terrified of being a little vulnerable. Serena froze, her luminous patterns dimming slightly. For a moment, she looked almost uncertain. Vulnerability, she said slowly, as though tasting the word, is a weakness. And yet, it seems to be your species' defining trait. Maybe, Jake said, softening his tone. But it's also what makes us adaptable. It's why we've survived, even when the odds were stacked against us. Sometimes, you have to embrace the chaos to find something worth holding on to. Serena regarded him in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. Perhaps there is some truth to your words, though I loathe to admit it. But that does not change our predicament. Have you at least determined how this incident occurred? Jake hesitated, then decided honesty was his best bet. Dr. Kapoor thinks it's a 1 in a billion chemical reaction. Something in the smoothie triggered dormant genes in your DNA. Basically, it's like your biology decided to throw a surprise party, and nobody RSVP'd. Serena's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly, as though she were fighting back a smile. A most inconvenient party, indeed. Jake chuckled, relieved to see her soften, even if just a little. Look, we're working on a solution. But in the meantime, maybe it's not the end of the world to let things play out. I mean, isn't this what your people have been mocking humans for? Our so-called primitive biology? Maybe it's time to see what all the fuss is about. Serena's gaze lingered on him, a mix of curiosity and exasperation. You truly are insufferable, she muttered, though there was no malice in her tone. Comes with the territory, Jake replied with a grin. But seriously, this could be an opportunity. Instead of treating it like a disaster, maybe it's a chance to. He was cut off by a sudden chime from Serena's communicator. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. It appears we are out of time. The council has called an emergency meeting. They suspect something is amiss. Jake winced. Let me guess. They're not big on second chances? Correct, Serena said grimly. If they discover the truth, you will likely be exiled, or worse. Jake swallowed hard. Great. So, no pressure. Serena's bioluminescence dimmed as she studied him. For what it is worth, I do not believe you acted with malice. Foolishness, perhaps, but not malice. I will do what I can to delay the council's judgment. But you must find a solution. Quickly. Jake nodded, his mind racing. I'll figure something out. I always do. Serena gave him a long, searching look before turning away. See that you do, human. For all our sakes. As she left, Jake felt a strange mix of fear and determination settle in his chest. The odds were against him, but if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was beating the odds. He just hoped he could pull it off before the Veiltrix Council decided to make an example out of him.